Yes, welcome back to hearing 21. We are getting through them, aren't we, Julie? Yes, for the afternoon session, I'm just looking at our program, and we now have the Ngāti Te Whiti Whenua Taupu Trust in the Ngā Maori Reservation Reserve. So welcome, Linda, and your team. We'll just hand over to you. I think you've put together some meeting notes we've just received, Linda, I think. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Sure.
I can kick us off. Kia ora koutou.
Yes.
So today's evidence is on the Maori purpose zone, and some of what we discussed yesterday in the port zone hearing provides some background and context to some of the matters that we'll discuss today. Merrily discussed in some detail yesterday the plans for the marae. And so today is really about talking more to the overall hapu development plan that we've submitted, which includes the plans for the marae, but also the wider development for that whole narrow piece of land that you were showing yesterday. So we'll kick off with Linda, and then Merrily will speak in detail to the hapu development plan, and I'll finish off with the planning.
Thank you, Cam.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia hiwara, kia hiwara, hei tēnei tuku. Kia hiwara, kia tera tuku. Hei whakapūrua koe ki te poto. Pāpaki tu ana ki tai o rihua. Iki pānuku, iki tamaro. Hui e, kai ki. For translation, be watchful, be watchful. Be alert to the terrorists, be alert to that terrorist. Or someone will wound you and make you bleed. The tide gathers to rehua, move on into Tamaroa. Together it is done. What I have decided is a warning cry that was used by sentries who patrolled the path. They would call across the terraces to each other, reminding them to remain vigilant and alert to potential attacks. Our site of One Bailey Road, Plymouth, is attached to our ancestral pa, Otaka. Our historically renowned pa, where Ngāti Te Whiti and Te Atiawa defended attacks on the Waikato in the 1830s. Therefore, it is fitting that I open our presentation with this whakaara or whakatūpato that defends our right to partake in activities that will contribute to our economic, cultural and social well-being as afforded under the regulations of Māori Purpose Zone. My name is Linda McCulloch. I'm the descendant of Ngāti Te Whiti hapu of Ngā Motu. I am the chairperson of Ngāti Te Whiti Whenua Taupu Trust. The trust is responsible for the management of the land at One Bailey Road, owned by the beneficiaries or descendants of Ngāti Te Whiti hapu. The trustees of which are also current trustees of the Ngā Motu Marae Reservation. Both trusts are entities under the jurisdiction of the Māori Land Court. I provided a copy of the Māori Land Court minutes that confirms the land status in the trustees. The land at One Bailey Road was returned to Ngāti Te Whiti by the Grey Institute Trust in October 2002. This land is gazetted in the Māori Land Court in 4 blocks. The Ngā Motu Marae Māori Reservation is referred to as Motoro 3 and was granted by the Māori Land Court in 2016. So at the previous hearings, 5 and 14, and yesterday's submissions and evidence provided from Julie Healy, the chairperson of our Ngāti Te Whiti hapu, and Sarah Mako, kaimahi o tahitanga o Te Atiawa, and myself in these presentations you'll detail the cultural significance of Otakapa, the Namutu of Sugar Loaves, and these places of significance that continue to provide us with a physical and spiritual connection to the land, our history, and our tupuna. I've also provided a copy of the Namutu Cultural Values Report. This was produced by Dr. Danny Keenan and Victoria Keenan in 2012 as a submission to the Office of Treaty Settlement as part of the Te Atiawa settlement process. I will also refer to the impact of Port Development Position Paper that was done by Mano Whenua Reference Group in Kaitiaki of Ngāti Mutanga Te Atiawa Namahanga Atairi for the New Zealand Coastal Strategy, and that was produced in February 2006. These two documents provide succinct information outlining the continuous alienation of Ngāti Whiti to our ancestral lands and support the Ngāti Whiti cultural values framework developed for Port Taranaki Limited. Whilst land in our rohi of Ngāmutu has not been in our hapu ownership, we have a recorded history of defending this land by exercising our rights as tangata whenua, as we have maintained our position as ahika or ahika roa, meaning long-term occupation. After the battle at Otakapa in the 1830s, Ngāti Whiti whānau that remained settled what is known today as Rotorua. This area extended from Ngāmutu, the Sugarloaf, to the Kawerau Reef. Probably, I think we talked about it yesterday, Commissioner, so probably to like Belt Road or west of the Kawerau Castle. This area provided Ngāti Whiti with resources that ensured a prosperous existence. In 1840, land in Rotorua was acquired by the Wesleyan Church Mission, the Graves Institute Trust, under the condition that the land was to be used for education purposes for rangatahi, and if this were not the case, that the land would be refused. In total, the parcel of land...
Linda, we just, sorry to interrupt, we're just struggling to hear. Are others just struggling? There seems to be a bit of feedback going on, whether you could...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, just carry on. We're getting the gist of it, that's good.
Because I can't actually hear you. So fortunately, the room we're sitting in has a tin roof.
Yeah.
And the rain's falling. Quite nice. So any kind of specification we've had in Ngāti Whiti, it's always rained. So we don't have a good time. Possibly not helping our proceedings today, though.
It's good luck, I thought, but yeah, it's raining here in Hawke's Bay too, Linda.
Yeah.
Just carry on.
So I'll go back to in 1840. Do you read
Yes.
that part?
Yes.
Yep.
Start there.
Yep. So in 1840, land in Rotorua was acquired by the Wesleyan Church Mission, what we know as the Grace Trust Institute, under the condition that the land was to be used for education purposes for rangiatia. And if this were not the case, the land would be returned. So, the total parcel of land is 100 acres, known as the Whiteley Leaf land. This encompasses a large area of the Rotorua suburb, extending from Bailey Road eastward to Talbot Road. In 1860, the land became a Crown grant, and it was sold to Rowling and railway purposes. Yep. In 1992, the land was a 21-year lease with potential rights, and hence record of the 1 year lease. In 2012, the extension to office for sale, 90% of section is advanced, but another change of purpose was unsuccessful. Early in 2000, the site at One Bailey Road was identified as surplus land. Ngāti Whiti campaigned for the return of this land while stating the original purpose of the land was not upheld. Land was vested in 2003 to the Bailey Road Trust, now known as the Whenua Tōpū Trust. Let's go. Yeah, sorry. The following is an account on the impact of Port Development Position Paper by the Mana Whenua Woodford Group. I would probably say hand on heart that this narrative would have been written by Ricky Keenan. In 1881, Port Taranaki was constructed close to Ngāmutu, and the impact on the area has been considerable and significant. The shape of Paratitu was changed because the rock was blasted away with a view to using it for the construction of the port. The shape of Mosoro was altered in the 1920s when the port company carried out quarrying. There has been extensive land reclamation around the port for the construction of the power station and at Ngāmutu Beach to provide port facilities. One important muscle and power reef was covered with the power station development, whilst a reef in a Waitaki site was covered with Ngāmutu Beach reclamation. The beach itself, which runs stretched from the present-day Belt Road to Mukatahi, has also been drastically altered and reduced. Although Ngāti Wiki have actively objected to various harbour board projects, its views have had little impact. The most controversial harbour action was the demolition of the Ngāti Wiki settlement between the Humihumi and Tutu Streams in 1935, and the removal of the Ngāti Wiki family for health reasons. This action was challenged in court by Ngāti Wiki families on the basis that the health care was a ploy and that Ngāti Wiki had an inalienable right to the land through continual and undisputed position, but they were unsuccessful against the empowering legislation used by the Harbour Board. The site at 1 Bailey Road is currently defined as 4 separate plots. Maori Reservation, I believe, is the Maori Purple Zone. The remaining land is of open space zone status. We see several benefits of making the whole site Maori Purple Zone. Land and collective ownership of land for Māori provides cultural, spiritual, physical, and economic opportunities. These aspects are realised through identity, connection, and well-being. And in return, hapu are responsible to ensure these lands are respected and tended to under the responsibility of Kaitiaki Tanga. In terms of identity, restoring our ability to have a collective settlement or whakawhānga and tūranga waiwai, a physical, spiritual presence, will allow us to truly assert our rangatira. I believe the general perception of the community is that this land is public land, and at this stage we have no intentions of restricting public access to use the land for recreational activities, but we do want them to be respectful when they are on our land. Connection, the ability to practice and realise the aspirations that our children are held and we ourselves held for our present and coming generations is immeasurable. Restoring our connection to the land and our surrounding landmarks will provide a pathway to our history and enhance our mana. Our tamariki and Mukapuna will have the physical connection that we have not had today. Well-being occurs spiritually, culturally, and economically. The ability to achieve activities that will allow for innovation and enterprise will contribute to our overall well-being. As you are aware, Maori is well into development. So we do not have secured funding we did not secure funding under the recent government's shovel-ready scheme. Our project did get to the final stage of full consideration. We have received a $2 million grant from the Water from Koi Foundation and are seeking more funding. The ability to achieve our aspirations through addition of housing and economic enterprise will truly cement our standing here in Ngāmutu. I am not naive in my thinking that a Maori Purple Zone will exclude any other regulatory obligation, but I do believe it will enhance the mana of this land and us of Ngāti Wiki. Okay. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou tātou. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Linda. And look, apologies, I should have introduced Antoine Coppin.
Sorry, I can't hear. I might have to change rooms.
Yeah, that might be good. Maybe it's your connection too, Linda.
I don't know. Maybe, yeah.
Okay. Cam, do you have a suggestion that maybe?
I was thinking, yeah, perhaps Linda could try and establish a better connection, and we could move on to Murali, and then maybe you could come back to questions with
Yes.
Linda at the end.
Yes, that would be good. If you could just communicate with her, Cam, and we'll move on to Murali if that's, or we could take a break. I'm relaxed, but what do you suggest?
Yeah, I think we could move on to Murali, and I'll try and communicate with Linda and give her the message.
Mm. Yep. And when she comes back on, I'll do the introductions with Antoine. Antoine might know Linda, but I forgot to do that. But Antoine, maybe just say hello to everyone now.
Hey, kia ora pai tātou. Ko Antoine Coffin tōku nei ngō. I'm one of the hearing commissioners. I'm quite familiar with Ngāti Te Whiti and the marae proposal. I've received a presentation in the distant past, so it's really good to receive an up-to-date presentation, and certainly Mr. Bushka was going to provide some detailed information about the proposal moving forward. So I shouldn't say I'm excited, but I'm really interested. I'm really interested in hearing about the project. And I think for Linda, when she comes back to you, I didn't have any specific questions for her presentation she's given, but I wouldn't mind bringing up the current district plan map. So I'm just really clear in my head the extent of the area concerned, because I've got one of the appendices shows the extent of the actual site, but I just wanted to see that in context where it is. I think I've got it in my head, but I just want to be double sure.
Maybe Antoine will, when Cam gives us his overview from a planning point of view, there's a few, we heard quite a bit about this yesterday, was it yesterday? Associated with the port zone and some view shafts. But I'm just getting up to speed, Antoine, and there's a few questions I have of Cam, just orientating the planning maps and the rules and things too, which I think we'll catch up then.
Thank you.
Really?
Yep. Tēnā koutou katoa. Nā tangata whenua I tēnei rohe, Ngāti Te Whiti hapu, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koe Linda, mō tō kōrero nui te whakaro I tēnei kaupapa. Nā mihi kia kōrua komihana Daesh, Antoine, tēnā kōrua mō tō mahi I tēnei kaupapa, nā mihi. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko Murali Baskataku ingoa, I hold the position of Design Director at Boone Limited. We're an architectural firm based in New Plymouth. I've had the privilege of being part of Ngāti Te Whiti's aspirations and dreams, as I mentioned to you, Commissioner, yesterday, for several years, since 2005. I've been asked by the submitters to provide an expert architectural evidence in relationships to the matters arising from the Maori Purpose Zone chapter of the Council's PDP. So my evidence today pertains to the architectural matters. I'm the lead architect for the Ngā Motu Marae, and I'm also the lead architect for the Ngāti Te Whiti Hapu development plan. The proposed development plan is extremely significant to Ngāti Te Whiti Hapu. The plan was developed for it to be included in the PDP, and I've been asked to provide some further detail, as I mentioned. So I'd like to now ask Julie if you can just start sharing the plan to highlight the various zones, and I'll answer questions later. The original plan was developed in 2012.
Sorry, Murali, which plan are you referring to?
The annex in my evidence, that's the development plan.
Okay, I'll just need to find that, one moment.
Cool. Just for the benefit of those who are watching in, you'll notice that I'm not looking at this my camera. I've got my brand new flash screen next to it, so I've been able to bring up all the evidence next door. So
Oh, yeah.
excuse, I'm not being impolite. I'm just looking at the evidence and the maps next door.
So the original plan was developed in 2012 and 13. It's been further revised since this time to incorporate the consented Ngā Mutu Marae, which is currently resource consented. And again, it's been recently revised to address the PDP matters. The bulk, in terms of bulk and location, the Ngāti Te Whiti development plan includes, as discussed yesterday, Commissioner Daesh, the Ngā Mutu Marae, which is essentially has a whare nui, a whare kai, and an office administration facility, a 3 to 4 story commercial building, which is on the corner of Bailey Road and Ocean View Parade. The idea of the commercial development being on that corner is it sits as a buddy to this port buildings on the opposite side, as well as the proximity of the site to the family-friendly Ngā Mutu beach and to the port and the commercial activities as being appropriate for this location. It is the intention that earnings from the commercial development will further support Ngā Mutu Marae and Ngāti Te Whiti Hapu. So the other elements of the development plan include the production, education, and hospitality facilities. That's on the eastward side of the actual marae. That includes glass houses, orchards, hangi pits, marakai, and some hospitality spaces. Hospitality with a cultural experience is what's been promoted. It is intended that this area will provide community interaction both for Hapu and the wider community, and also provide a place for Ngāti Te Whiti to share their story, along with providing training, social enterprise opportunities with produce and product that connects the marae activities to the hospitality outlet. Then there are these workshops and classroom spaces, including tunnel houses, implement storage sheds, little garages, woodworking, for teaching woodworking and carving, etc. And then on the eastern side of the site, we're proposing papakainga, about 15 to 20 dwellings of varied typologies. It will consist of a mixed range made up of 2 to 4 bedrooms, single and 2-level houses. The close proximity of the papakainga to the proposed marae will then allow the inhabitants of the housing to engage in activities that are carried out on the marae. Infrastructure will include 3 waters, power, roading, and transportation. They'll be based on Te Aranga sustainable design principles, and it is desired to have minimal impact on the existing environment and the existing New Plymouth District Council services. For example, rainwater harvesting with a bit of top up from the New Plymouth water supply, remediation of low-lying wetlands, remediation and putting right of the historic stream alignment, and therefore reinstating the connection to the Moana. Wastewater, the site we understand is well serviced by the New Plymouth District Council connections and has the capacity for the proposed development. Preliminary geotech assessments indicate that ground conditions are suitable to provide flood-free, stable building platforms. From a transportation point of view, the Ngāti Te Whiti development plan proposes 2 site access points on those red triangles on the plan. The Bailey Road provides access to the proposed commercial area and coach access. Now that's the consented, resource consent allows for that road to be developed and allows for sort of larger groups visiting the marae to come up in coaches and turn around. And the second access is off the Ocean View Parade and utilizes the contours formed from a previous entry. The Ocean View Parade provides a linkage between the coastal walkway and the Ngā Mutu beach and the port, and the development plan provides, if you look at the yellow arrows on the eastern side or the right side, it talks about how in collaboration with the NPDC, there's an opportunity to facilitate the coastal walkway connection to the Ngāti Te Whiti site, and therefore, the aspiration is to have a demystified and open site, so people, if they wanted, can traverse through the site. The landscape design and ecology, including revegetation, uses a holistic approach of kiuta kitai, the mountain to the sea, remediation planting by using native and endemic species to revegetate the various parts of the site is proposed to bring it as close as possible to the natural environments as possible. Planting will be positioned to provide a buffer and avoid any potential adverse effects to residential neighbours and the port activities. Protection of the white tapu urupa has been considered through allocating this area as a non-development zone and implementing set walkways and planted areas to manage pedestrian interaction with the area. Restoration and enhancement of the wetlands and waterways and creation of new water-sensitive design interventions on site are also proposed to protect the Maori associated with the Y. The spatial orientation of the buildings and spaces on site also connect and align approximately with the proposed view shaft to the culturally significant Ngā Sugarloaf Islands, which is of high importance, as we discussed yesterday, helping to protect the Maori of the whenua. Further protection is maintained as this orientation is north to northwest, resulting in good daylight exposure as well as connection to the moana. The Ngāti Te Whiti Hapu development plan consists of a variety of elements, including buildings, infrastructure, landscape design, environmental and ecological consideration. It is my opinion that the entire site of Ngāti Te Whiti development plan is best suited as Maori purpose zone, where all activities on site form part of a cohesive zone. Under the PDP, the zone is created as two parts, the Maori purpose zone and the open space zone. In my professional opinion, this should be managed under the same zone. My understanding is this matter is to be discussed at a future hearing. In my professional opinion, the proposed Ngāti Te Whiti development plan is well suited to be incorporated within the PDP, as it meets all the required criteria of the PDP and will provide benefit to Hapu and the wider community and aligns with future objectives and outcomes desired for the Rohe. The development is proposed with the marae, with the commercial buildings, papakainga, education, training, marakai facilities, along with the revegetation and wetland restoration will be an asset to the region. If council considers the development plan needs further detail, I'd be more than happy to make any required updates and work collaboratively on behalf of Ngāti Te Whiti. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you very much, Murali. I will just hand over to Antoine just to start off any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Pascal. That was really helpful, and I appreciated you going through the detail of the development plan and the different elements, and also you mentioned the principles that you're using, kiuta kitai, the tiaranga principles. I was wondering if you'd just give us a little bit of background in terms of the development of the plan with the Whenua Tōpū Trust and Ngāti Te Whiti Hapu members, please.
Yep, tēnā koe, Antoine. So I've been part of this process since 2005, and we've had numerous wānanga with Kaumatua and Hapu members along the way, and the design initially identified these various zones based on, having traversed the site and looked at what's important in terms of the connections the Hapu had with the whenua around the moana. And over the period of 15 years, the zones that we've talked about have been consistent, and this has been again discussed with council on and off, and the port. So this is not something that's just been developed in the last few months. It's taken a long time, and as hapu would say it's a generational proposal.
Sorry about that, I double clicked.
That's right.
I'm just looking at Waitapu, the Urupa, and the commissioners were lucky enough to have a site visit where we went past
Aye.
Waitapu and also the wetlands and that particular part of Ocean View Parade. And I just wondered if you could talk to the commercial area and how you're addressing the sensitivity of proximity to the Urupa, because I know right on that edge there is the influenza epidemic burials as well. So could you just talk about what that interface might look like between the Urupa and the commercial building on the corner?
Yep. So this road currently exists, and there are some houses and dwellings along here that sit. And up until I think, Linda, you could help me here. Up until the early 80s, I think, there used to be houses along here, Papakainga, and some of whānau and hapu used to reside there. But we've done archaeological research, and the archaeologists have suggested that we keep the development of the commercial building on that side of the road, and the connection to the Urupa will then be done using ecological, a landscape revegetation planting plan, creating a buffer. But at the same time, it's also a place to tell the stories of the hapu and even the Urupa along those edges. So it would be treated in a slightly more urban kind of context. But the commercial building has been proposed, like I mentioned in my evidence, to interact with Namutu Beach, which is quite a popular family-oriented beach. So you could imagine fish and chips or ice creams, or that sort of connection to this area. So people park and they come to the beach, and there's nothing around here that allows them to provide any kind of hospitality unless they go to the other end of the eastern end of the port. So it sits quite nicely as a place where the community can interact, whilst making allowance for the hapu to have a commercial development.
I've just got another question. It's probably quite specific to the commercial building. In the points above it, identifies as I think it was 850 square meters, perhaps.
Yeah, as a footprint.
As a footprint, and then there was 3 to 4 stories.
Yep.
And I'm just looking at the building envelopes, in particular height for. That's in relation to the boundary, but heights for buildings and structures is 10 meters. For other buildings, 8 meters. And I just wondered if you had any comments, because obviously you've just got stories, not the height, building height. But what are you thinking the building height's going to be, and that envelope, that close proximity to the boundary?
Yeah, probably 3 to 4 would be 12 to 14.
Has there been any consideration of that building height to the location of Waitapu, the Urupa, so like building overlook? Because I do realise it does go downhill there a bit.
Yeah, it does.
It's quite steep there.
Yep.
Has there been any? Have you considered the potential effects of having a large building next door to the Urupa in terms of its height and bulk? You've talked about having the buffer, the existing road and that, but I'm just talking about scale.
Yeah, in terms of scale, if I just point to this port building,
yes,
that's a three, and like I mentioned, this commercial building was meant to be like a buddy to this port building, and the port building's on a much higher ground, and it's 3 stories high. So this wouldn't have come, we don't believe it'll be too much out of context with what's already there. And Kaumatua and Hapu have been consulted, and they were happy with that, with the height that we'd proposed.
Thank you. I think it's my last question was just in regards to, just bring it up on my big screen here. The access to the eastern part of the Papakainga, and because you've shown the 2 main vehicle entries, is it anticipated that there'd be an internal roads providing car access to those Papakainga, or is it just going to be pedestrian, sort of park and walk down?
Oh, definitely there is a car access road.
Okay.
And it comes with a turnaround here.
Oh, okay. Yep, I can see that.
Yep.
Yes. Yep.
And this entry would be for light vehicles only.
Okay.
There has been other ideas mooted, but the road across to come across from in front of the arterial was not the most preferred, because Kaumatua didn't want vehicle access in front of the arterial,
Yeah.
if it could be avoided.
It certainly makes sense. And I just wondered, 15 to 20 dwellings, and would they be staged? Would you look at building 15 to 20 all at the same time, or would you sort of like build a few, then fill those, and then build the next ones, like a staged development?
Yeah, I mean, depending, it's really budget driven. And one thing we need to do is, before we do the Papakainga, we have to install the infrastructure, and that has to be done for the marae as well. So the rest of it would be staged depending on available funds.
It probably in part answers my next question, because I was just thinking about how many traffic movements you're anticipating, but that really depends on the stages of the development. And
yeah,
I was going to circle back to make sure that the main entry is going to be able to provide for the ultimate number of vehicles that you might have on site.
Yeah.
But certainly you won't be using that capacity when you start up.
No, and like I mentioned earlier, this road used to feed Papakainga all the way up here.
Okay.
And there were houses on both sides. There is historical photographs showing, yeah, and
just in terms of those dwellings, there's a number of different types of typologies. I see 90 square meters to 160 square meters. So
correct.
Did you have a feel for how many small dwellings? I assume that they could be, for small families or single people or kaumatua, and ones that might be more for families or communal living.
Yeah, I guess the main idea behind is to create a variety of typologies, so you don't just cater for singles or one person or a certain demographic. We wanted to invite young people as well as middle-aged and older people to come together, and that's part of sharing the knowledge, rather than having only kaumatua flats or this. So it was trying to create a community, a diverse community, hence the typologies reflect that diverse community needs. So we're not sure how many would be 50 square meters and how many would be 90 as yet. That's the next level of detail, but we do know that between 50 and 20 would touch the earth lightly on that site. It has potential to do a lot more, but that hasn't been what what the hapu have aspired.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Just my last question, the marae and the wetlands, certainly the commercial area and the play space and recreation space have really good connections to the moana, both visually and physically. And as you go further east, there's less connection. And I just wondered if there'd been any consideration around the dwellings and the placing of those dwellings to some of those commercial activities directly to the north.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm asking this question, because we've been having a discussion earlier this morning, which you haven't been part of, was around, now once you put one of these plans into the district plan, as was currently being suggested, there might be changes in the future for good reasons, like, you know, in terms of moving some of the dwellings or buildings around to better fit the circumstances to respond to different issues that may come up that seem to be important. And I just wanted to, in that regard, to see in terms of the placement of those dwellings on this particular plan and any consideration of those activities directly to the north.
Yep. So what the plan doesn't show you is the contours and how steeply it falls from the railway line to the road. There's a significant drop, hence why the placement of the buildings are more closer to the south side. And likewise, some of these buildings on this side would be on poles because there is a real steep drop there. Hence, we can then keep the heights flowing down on the slopes. In terms of connection to the moana, you get really good vistas and views from above here, as long as there's no further large developments on the port side. So yeah, so that's been taken care of, and we've even we will be looking at some vantage points where you could come and sit and ponder and look across to the moana from the top of that on the eastern side. Hence why this connection to the coastal walkway makes sense, because you could come up, and that's a really good point to stand and look down through the whole development, as well as look out to the horizon and the Patatutu and Ngāmotu Islands.
Thank you very much for those answers. That's all my questions, Stephen.
Ngā mihi.
Just checking that my speaker's on, I think it is. Yes, tēnā koe, Murali. I just had a couple of just geography questions, really, or a lesson. The blue and white hash lines and the red and white hash lines, can you just remind me what those are?
They're just infrastructure, stormwater, sewer, water,
Yes.
and power lines, and how we would reroute them. Just providing a bit of detail to say, hey, we have thought about it.
Yes.
And these are in tune with the contours of the land and existing facilities that we can connect to. There is existing council services that go under the wetlands and where the marae is, and those will need to connect into these new services. So we're working with what's existing. We're working with the existing contours.
Yes, it's quite an exciting site, as you say, with the elevation, down from the railway line. It's difficult sometimes, but you've really worked with that pretty well, just from my eye, Murali.
Yeah.
I did have another question about detail. The red crosshatch line at the top right of your plan indicates location of current parcel boundaries. Can you talk to me about that and what's going on there? You're not using that for some reason? Is that part of the road, or?
It's part of the road. That the road is constructed over the Whenua-Taupu land, and as far as I'm aware, there's no intention from the trust, and Linda, you can come in here, to to block or access, or should the, but that is just the port have essentially built a road over Ngāti Te Whiti's land.
Okay, now that's what I thought looking through the aerial. That was probably the case. And look, I had the pleasure of the full slideshow yesterday from you, Murali. It looks an awesome project and something you'll be very proud to be part of. And Antoine, just for your benefit, I think, Julie, those should be online on the Hearing 20 Port Zone site.
They will
And
be, not yet, but
yes,
I understand Christine has circulated the documents to Antoine.
from yesterday.
I think so.
All those nice ones that were sent through this morning?
Yes.
Okay.
Possibly.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. And this is a bit of a three-stage process. We had the special port zone yesterday and the day before with Kit, and that was really bringing forward the issue of view shafts from the main marae, Antoine.
Okay.
For Nui, for Kai, that area to the islands, particularly the Motu. And we certainly had a very good introduction, and we had a landscape architect, Mr. McEwen, talk to us about that, and he'll be doing some conferencing with the port planners and the other landscape architects as part of that. And then we have this, which is dealing with the provisions of the zone. And my understanding, Cam, is part of this area is currently zoned Maori Purpose Reserve, part of it is open space, or is it all open space at the moment?
Yeah, it's all open space at the moment.
Okay.
It's proposed to be part Maori purpose, part open space.
Okay, so will come up on the rezoning hearing, and there'll be a discrete hearing that I think Joe will be reporting on, as we heard earlier this morning. So yes, it's the way we're doing these hearings for this important project. There's interface at least three different hearings. So Murali, I've got a very good appreciation now. Thank you for your assistance and your advice. We stay in and around this area when we're lucky enough to come to Taranaki outside of COVID. So as Antoine said, we had a very good site visit, up and down the coast, but I'll certainly make the point of having a really good walk around on my walks, just to really think about the plan now that I've seen it, and just the heights, and just get that mental map in my own mind. So thank you for that. So Cam, I think having said that, we're moving on to you now in terms of the planning position.
Kia ora kōrua, called Cam Twigley, tōku ingoa. So I wanted to start off just with a couple of amendments to my evidence. The first one is paragraph 9, where I've said that my evidence relates to some of the submissions that are accepted in part. It only really relates to one submission point and one rule. So I just wanted to clarify that in case that confused matters.
Yes.
And then in paragraph 12, I've used the term general accordance, but actually the provisions in the plan talk about accordance, and we've had some previous discussions around that particular issue. So yeah, just a wee change there, just to remove the word general. So yeah, just to recap, so the Trust's original submission point was to support Rule 22, which relates to building activities that are in accordance with a hapu development plan or iwi development plan permitted. And then the submission sought to include a hapu development plan within Schedule 11 of the PDP. So the Section 42A report identified that the plan that we'd submitted did not meet all of the information requirements that are outlined in Policy 3. So, like as Murali's outlined, we went away and had a close look at Policy 3 and where we thought the information gaps were, and further developed that plan to a point where we think it does meet those information requirements in Policy 3. I'm not I wasn't tuned in this morning Mo's presentation, and I'm not sure whether she addressed that particular issue or not, but I'd certainly be keen to get some feedback on whether we've achieved that or not. And as Murali said, if we haven't, we're certainly open to working collaboratively with the council around filling any gaps that there might be.
Yes, Cam, we had a quite a long discussion with Joe around the rules and that policy 3, and I'm just thinking it might be beneficial for me to paraphrase where I think we got to in that discussion, and then Joe, Antoine, very happy to have a bit of a dialogue, Correro, around that with you, Cam, just to get your input. But before we do that, I am quite keen just to understand the zoning position and what's in the plan as notified and what you're seeking in terms of the split between open space and Maori purpose zone. Is there a plan we could look at that identifies that? The actual zoning pattern you're looking to achieve will be in your submission, I presume.
Yeah, I don't believe that we've prepared any evidence for the zoning request.
Okay, but the submission must have requested some geographic scope.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So essentially, we've asked for all of the 5 land parcels to be zoned multi-purpose.
Okay, but
Yeah.
but currently, as in the plan at the moment, apologies,
The operative plan or the proposed plan?
the proposed plan.
Proposed plan is a split zone, so it's
Yes,
part Maori purpose, part open space.
yes.
Can I just jump in there, Commissioner? Just to confirm that we did map the proposed sort of marae site as we knew it at the time, and the Waihi Tapu area as Māori purpose zone, but the areas to the north, east, west, and the narrow part, and where the commercial building would be, and adjacent to the railway line, some of that is not zoned as Maori purpose zone at the moment.
And that has open space zoning.
That's correct, yes.
Yes. All right. No, that gives me the view. So, so are you happy for me to paraphrase, or Joe, would you like to just do that paraphrase about where we got to?
No, I'm happy for you to.
Okay.
I'll
I'll do my best. And this is, we're here to, we'll be quite careful. We're here to hear things and not direct traffic too much. But I'll so it was interaction, Cam, between the MP said P3 requirement, which supports the use of iwi hapu development plans. And Joe started off talking about just some concerns she had. This was communicated by Antoine about once you get one of these things into the plan, district plan, it's quite difficult to, because it's got quite a lot of detail in the one that you've submitted, quite difficult to change it, and you might have to work through a Schedule 1 process to make some alterations, and we were chatting about how inefficient that would be. And then I had a discussion with Joe about the differences between the two rules, MPZ R21 and MPZ R22. And I was asking about, you know, if I was a consent planner advising the trust, MPZ 21 relates to a range of activities for buildings for which no iwi hapu development plan applies, and the only control there, and that covers, in terms of buildings, all that has to be complied with, and these may or may not be onerous or not, the effect standards, so permitted activity. And if you fell out of those, if you didn't have a plan, you'd be looking at a permitted, a restricted discretionary activity. So, but then if you did have an iwi or hapu development plan, MPZ R22 would apply, and you'd have to be in accordance with that. And if you weren't in accordance, if, for example, I don't know, I'm just thinking for funding reasons, you want to do something slightly differently with the Papakāinga zones, you'd be in the position of RDIS as well. So I was struggling with sort of the benefits for a Maori purpose zone landowner and developer, thinking, wow, the zone is specially built to allow a whole range of things as permitted activities, Maori purpose activities, Maori cultural activities, a full list of R1 through to R10, which are all permitted, including general retail activities and other things, business service activities. And then in terms of buildings, you're pretty well permitted without a plan anyway, provided the performance standards are complied with. So we were thinking between us that for the trust, we might have a better, I was called it a consenting pathway, but a non-consenting pathway through along on R21 rather than R22. I wondered whether you saw any flaws in that argument, or whether you had any thoughts, Cam, on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with the point that you've picked up on there, and I think if you went back again and drafted this plan, you'd have a very close look at that, because, you know, the point of having the chance of submitting a hapu development plan, it should make, if that's accepted, it should make things more enabling than the rest of the provisions if you don't have a hapu development plan. You know, it's much the same as the benefit that you receive from having a precinct plan in the hospital zone or the major facility zone, you know, which is a clear construct of this plan that we're working on here to develop. So although it's in different terms, you know, the hapu development plan, it's not a precinct plan. In my view, the same sort of construct to it should apply, and I think you've picked up on a really good issue that it doesn't necessarily do that. It doesn't create that outcome because of the way that some of the other provisions are constructed, and also the you know, coming back to this term about in accordance with, you know, versus say in general accordance, you know, how much room to move is there from this high level plan that we've provided, and to me, this is, for a concept plan, this is still quite a detailed plan, you know, and recognizing that any of these types of developments, you know, you go through a sequence of design stages, you know, starting with this conceptual design, and I'm sure Marilla could talk to this. And then, you know, as you hone in on particular areas, say like the Papakainga housing, you get more information, you know, you move into a more detailed level of design, and all of these levels come with cost and risk and all these things. So naturally you don't provide all the detail in the first plan, because that's just inefficient. And
yes. So Joe and I ended up, we were wondering whether perhaps another outcome might be that you keep the plan outside the district plan. Certainly it's a great process, and the council's policy supporting the development of these plans, it does go through quite a structured way, and obviously hugely helpful for the hapu and the designers looking at this. But if you had that not locked into the district plan and relied perhaps more on R21 to progress our project without needing resource consents, and perhaps if some of the standards might be triggered, you could deal with those discreetly. And the other thing I raised with Joe was whether, given the enabling nature of the zone for Maori purpose activities and the objectives, which are very specific, it's very encouraging to get exactly this type of project off the ground. That would it be appropriate to have it as a controlled activity for matters that, you know, offended the standards? So there was just dialogue between the council and the applicant, but that was on the basis that we don't have any submissions opposing, and it's a very, very directive sort of objectives and policy. So that was my paraphrase. Joe, whether you or Antoine wanted to pick up that discussion.
I would just agree with your paraphrase, Commissioner. Those are all the points we covered today, this morning.
Okay.
Yeah, I just agree that that's what we covered. Something that was apparent to me just during the break, Stephen, was in terms of incentives, because this morning we focused on disincentives. It seemed there was a disincentive to prepare a hapu development plan, although it makes good sense to actually have a good plan. Certainly I don't think there was a feeling that we thought that it's not a good idea. But in terms of incentives, I wonder, and Cameron, I'm trying to make this as open question as possible, that there may be situations where iwi or hapu are in a situation, landowners are in a situation where they're wanting to create a sort of a long-term vision of what they might look to have on their development, and just understanding the rate of development. Sometimes a Māori land can be different to other land, and they might seek to have a plan change, I suppose a plan in the plan that sets out long term, and I suppose we're thinking about 10 years, 10 to 15 years, there's that certainty in there. This is what's anticipated to happen in this area. So you can come back in 5 years or 8 years rather than necessarily having to act quickly in terms of a less certain non-consenting pathway. I just wondered if you had any views about that.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's very much the case here, that the trust wants to be very transparent in terms of what their future development plans are. And also, you know, this opportunity came along when the plan was notified, and there already was a development plan in place. So it wasn't like, let's create one from scratch, as Miralee said, you know. So it seemed like a logical thing to do, to go, oh, okay, well, here's an opportunity to embed this in the planning framework, you know, long term, you know, be very transparent in terms of what the aspirations are. But I think, yeah, the issue is that the provisions as they're written don't necessarily incentivize that approach as much as they perhaps should. Commissioner Daish, you know, that suggestion around the controlled activity, I think that's a really sensible one, because then, you know, there's still a level of control where you don't comply or not in accordance with that development plan. So there's a consent process there to address those issues where the changes lie, but at the same time, it's still an enabling activity status that gives you some advantage over RD under the R21. Yeah.
So I think that where it left me and Joe's going to think about this and certainly report back to us on this. You know, between R21 and R22, there's probably some work to do within the scope of the submissions. You know, you've provided this, you've asked for the zoning. I think, not sure whether you saw specific changes to the rules, which we have to be quite careful about. And Joe and Cam, I'd encourage you to have a discussion about this further, and what we've been saying about post-hearing discussions with the 42A officers and other experts is, you know, we do anticipate those in the hearing procedures. We do encourage them. If there's more than one party, we'd want to make sure that it wasn't just one-on-one, but we don't have any other parties here. And the main thing is, if you have those discussions and dialogue, just record having had those, Joe, in your 42A report, just to particularly around scope and what might be able to be achieved to best meet the objectives of the zone, if that's clear.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, the vast majority of the submitters are iwi and hapu
Supporting.
Yes, supporting, and I wouldn't say that I'm across the full scope of those submissions in terms of these particular rules. So there may be some other parts.
Yes.
Yeah, because obviously it's going to equally apply to all multi-purpose zones, any changes that are made.
Yes, but Cam, I think you're the only one, or the trust is the only one that's put up a iwi and hapu development plan. So this is the sweet point we're talking about. Certainly Keith and Sarah, Marlene, maybe Mario were on board when we were having that discussion with Joe, and it's wider applicability. So there might be some scope within other submissions, I'm not sure, but that's the tenor of the task. Within scope, what's the most effective and efficient way of meeting the objectives of the zone and the strategic directions of the plan within the scope of the submissions that we have. Yes.
Thank you.
Cam, yeah, and Joe. So Cam and Joe, if we could leave you, Joe, to just organise any.
Sure.
Yep. Don't know whether it needs to be any formal conferencing, but just if it's a get together and a meeting and a discussion and that's recorded, that's pretty fine. But if
that's great,
with a proper conferencing process, do that as well. But it might not need to be
too formal. Thank you. Can't meet at the moment anyway. So
no, that's strange with councils. Like we in the private sector, we can go and hold meetings. We have vaccination things, but obviously it's a council requirement.
And I'm in isolation at the moment anyway because my husband has COVID. So
oh, Joe.
I'm afraid it would have to be by Zoom. Sorry, Ken.
Yeah. What day are you into your isolation?
Only day 3, I think.
Okay.
So I've got a few more to do.
Yeah. So thank goodness for Zoom, even though it's a pain.
Yes. Yeah.
It means we've managed to keep tracking along with the mahi on this plan. It's
that's great. Yeah.
Okay. Cam, was there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I believe that was it. So it would be just whether you wanted to come back to any questions of Linda.
Linda, are you hearing me
kia ora.
okay
I've-
now?
Look, yeah. I relocated. I'm at Mahi. I'm at my job. So yeah, it's good having tech guys on site. Yeah.
Great. And I was gonna, when you weren't hearing me, I was gonna introduce you to Antoine. I don't know whether you've met Antoine before, who's my fellow commissioner on this this chapter. So
No.
just
Tēnā koe, Anton.
yes, and
Yeah.
Antoine's our main questioner. That's why we set things
Cool.
up. So he may have some questions.
I did have some questions, but actually Miralee has actually answered those. It was really contextual and about the development and where things were, and he did a really good job of just explaining that and the spaces between them. So I didn't have any further questions for you. We received your notes and were able to have a quick read of those.
Well, that
before
was
you
good,
came on,
yeah.
So thank you very much. It was really clear.
No, that's fine, because like I said, the room I was in previously, it's just got a perspex roof. There's no proper roof for soundproofing, and obviously the rain. But like I said, we've had other auspicious events for our hapu, and it's always rained, so that's a good sign for us. Yep.
Yes, and Linda, just for you and your team, we really enjoy receiving evidence, particularly when you provide the not sure what the name of it, the introduction to your evidence, and just the translation. You know, that's powerful evidence for us. You know, we've received evidence on some of these tangata whenua issues in Waiata and other hearings, certainly through some of these proverbs and whakatauki and those sorts of things. So it really does add a lot of value to us as decision makers. So I'd like you to thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Kia ora.
All right, thank you. I think we will move on to Julie Healy. Is Julie there?
Sarah may be able to update you, but Julie is unlikely to be able to join us today.
Okay. Hello, Sarah.
Julie. Tēnā tātou.
Oh, surprise, she is here.
So Commissioner,
The reception out here is shocking, so I might drop out. If you wanted to carry on, Sarah, would be great.
oh no, I was just going to say, Commissioner Dash and Commissioner Coffin, Julie is providing evidence on behalf of Te Kotaitanga in a Ngāti Te Whiti capacity. Actually, Ngāti Te Whiti didn't have submission scope to this particular hearing, so
You're appearing underneath the Te Kohitanga.
yeah, Te Kotaitanga.
Yes, Te Kohitanga. Thanks, Sarah, and thank you, Julie. Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
You're coming through reasonably loud and clear at the moment. So, and we do have some speaking notes, so we'll just hand over to you.
Okay, thank you. We've done introductions. I think I need to do that. Kia ora, everybody. Good to see everyone again. The purpose of this evidence, special purpose Māori purpose zone. Special purpose Māori purpose zone. Yeah, as detailed in my statements and evidence to hearings 5, 9, 14, 18 and 20, I set out the importance of the rohi and Ngāti Te Whiti hapu, historically, traditionally, culturally, spiritually, and that our relationship with our rohi includes being future focused to provide for our tamariki mokopuna and future generations. Although all of the whenua of Ngāti Te Whiti rohi has been subject to muru me te raupatu, this will not define the future endeavours and aspirations of Ngāti Te Whiti. Ngāti Te Whiti support the introduction of the Māori purpose zone into the proposed district plan, and Ngāti Te Whiti support the submission of the Ngāti Te Whiti whenua tōpū and the Kotahitanga Te Atiawa to rezone 1 Bailey Road, New Plymouth, entirely to Māori purpose zone. I understand that piece of whenua would be the only property zoned in the MPZ in Ngāti Te Whiti's rohi. Ngāti Te Whiti consider there are additional properties that would benefit from the Māori purpose zone, whilst Ngāti Te Whiti Hapu do not have submission scope to this specific point, I consider it is reasonable to highlight this here to provide context to the cultural landscape and other properties. The other properties include Mangaroa, which is Council Reserve, Papawhero, Council Reserve, Whakapiti Pā, Council Reserve, Pukaka Pā, Council Reserve, Namutu Pā, Council Reserve, Paritutu Te Mapui, Council Reserve, Pupeko Native Reserve, Western Park, Council Reserve, and the grave of Marurau at Marurau Crescent at Council Historic Reserve, even though that is a private property there, it was belonging to Tupari Kino in the days. Any future properties acquired by Ngāti Te Whiti Hapu, the Hapu would like the opportunity to explore rezoning to Māori purpose zone. So recommendations to address the issues that I've raised, this evidence recommends support for social purpose, Māori purpose zone in the proposed district plan, consideration given to additional New Plymouth District Council properties to be rezoned special purpose Māori purpose zone. So kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Sorry, I'm quickly doing that because it's starting to rain.
Yeah.
And you're going to get that. The background's not too good. No soundproof here.
Yeah, no, you did well there, Julie, thank you. Antoine, I'll hand over to you.
Ai tēnā koe, Julie. E mihi kawana kia koe whakaputa ngā whakaro e runga i tēnei kaupapa. Thank you for your submission of support. And I just, I'm thinking aloud here. I'm hoping this is a question more than a thought. In terms of those reserves which you've identified, it appears to me, and I'm assuming they're not owned by Ngāti Te Whiti or Te Aotearoa at the present time. They're council reserves?
No, they're not. There is, I think, I'm not too sure, on the Whakapiti Pā, there is something there with Ngāti Te Whiti Council and Namahanga Tairi. I've yet to follow up. I'm not sure who's waiting for who to get back to whom, but there's a bit of business there. But the rest of them, no.
In terms of identifying those as potential Māori purpose zones in the future, did you see this chapter as providing the ability to perhaps do to prepare a hapu development plan for those, and then that would be considered by council as part of a plan change, perhaps in the future?
For the future, yes, would be great. We've had the opportunity in my tenure in the last, say, 3 coming up 4 years, to be able to, get that vision, to see that future and the need for hapu, to be able to develop even on the whenua, to have that, to be able to explore the possibilities.
Because my current understanding, and I might have to go back and have a look, is that the Māori purpose zone particularly applies to Māori land, and I understand that that's land that might be administered under the Te Ture Whenua Māori Land Act, and treaty settlement land, which is the proposed suggested change to that definition, but doesn't necessarily extend to council reserves. I just might to check that, but that's my current understanding.
Maybe I'm just being optimistic, and maybe one day one of those reserves might come back.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just trying to set out
revisions
what my
made.
current understanding is. Yeah, okay.
But you're correct there. No, you are correct there.
Thank you.
They are council reserves, so we probably don't come under the 2 there. But yeah, being optimistic, whenua might return to the hapu one day. Is there a possibility? Provisions are made for this.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes, thank you, Julie. I just, maybe Sarah Mako could just confirm, are those, that list in Judy's evidence, are they requests for rezoning, or are they, as Julie says, perhaps aspirational?
Aspirational, Julie?
Aspirational.
Yes.
And just Commissioner Dashwood, we've got the opportunity now, just in response to Commissioner Coffin's point, and Joe may also be able to contribute. There's it will probably come up in hearing 22, and perhaps I'll probably discuss it with you on Friday as well, around the rezoning of reserves for as multi-purpose. So I know that council has had some legal opinion on that, and we're likely to provide some legal submissions around it to hearing 22 as well. So and just from memory, I don't have it up in front of me right now, but the overview of the chapter does refer to native reserves, which are council owned at the moment. There are a couple of them.
Okay.
You might be aware there's obviously a conflict with the Reserves Act and the,
yes.
and the RMA.
Yes. Yes, that Reserves Act can get pretty tricky when you're trying to navigate anything around what it's very prescriptive and managed by some, the council has a role, but yes, so Julie, I think it's good for you to be put forward these aspirational matters and evidence at this time, get it as part of the conversation. And if there is a Maori purpose reserve a Maori purpose zone that's developed in this district plan review, who knows in the future, what might be able to be agreed. So just understanding that, continually understanding the aspirations and putting those forward is a good thing to do, is perhaps what I'm trying to say.
Yes, we've had the likes of through settlement with the land bank, but that's already done under the settlement. So there's plenty other whenua, we're looking at Ngāti Te Whiti within our rohe, potentially. Kia ora.
Yeah, and we heard yesterday, from Linda, just about the way the land for this exciting Maori development sort of came back for a bit of a route, kicked off by the port, and then just working at that aspiration. These things, good things sometimes take a lot of time.
They do. Well, when we look at from Ngāmutu being the settlement and developed and losing, like I said the other day, that landscape of that, that ancient whenua or that ancient landscape, which we lost. Not only we lose the land, with that came, the loss of stories, the wahi tapu. I had a few things written down there. All those things are significant to identify our people. So, over the years, all those practices that our tupuna had to pass down for generations were lost through that. People did struggle to, maintain those practices, and the language was lost. Even though our grandparents spoke the language, it just wasn't in Taranaki. And I think they still lived in that whole thinking of, not to, they'll be punished at school, because that's what happened when they went to school. But we, through the years, we had people like the Ngā Tamatoa, I suppose, revitalising the language. We had Te Reo Taranaki, and then the coming of the the kohanga reos for our aunties, like Auntie Kathrangi, Auntie Emma and Auntie Doreen. They pushed those through the kohanga through Taranaki. We also had the Rangamari Arts and Crafts that were settled up at the top of Paritutu in 1975, which had to move in last year. So, we had all those cultural influences amongst us, but to have that on your own whenua and to be able to, build from there, I think would be a great thing, especially in the marae build.
We had that amazing kōrero from Rangi Kipa.
Rangi Kipa, yeah.
Kipa, and that was at the start of the week. It's been a long
You've heard it
week.
all. You've heard it. I think you've heard it right from.
Might even be last week, but it was incredibly powerful. And I was going to ask Rangi at the time, but just another thing that really I reflect on is the new history curriculum that's coming into schools, and it was delayed for a year, but now it's fully coming in. So all of our children, our tamariki, will get to learn these things, and then if they're celebrated and identified and named,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
named in the future, Maori tamariki can, look around themselves with pride about the place that they're from. So
Yeah, exactly.
That is a journey, isn't it?
It is a journey, and it would be mana enhancing for the mana, like you say,
Yeah.
good self-esteem. And who knows which direction we could go, could only get better
Yes.
development. Kia ora. Thank
Kia
you.
ora. Thank you, Julie, for that. All right, we'll move on.
Commissioner Dash, I just wondered, did you want to look at on the proposed district plan at any of those sites? I do have one site in particular that's identified in Julie's statement that might be of interest to you. You might not have heard much about it, but the grave of Manudo in
Yes,
particular.
I was interested in that. So certainly, if Julie, can you bring that up, or do you need Julie to?
I'd be happy to just navigate to it if
Yeah,
that's okay
great.
with you.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
So Julie or Linda actually might be able to give a bit of history around Manudo if you wanted, but I will take you there. So Manudo.
Kino. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Manudo would have come under the tūpare kino hapu. Where's Linda? You have to back me up. I might get a bit wrong here. I think this land here would have come through the poor Tōtara grants that I think was lost from tūpare kino, went into what they call the land reserves for the land grantees. And it was, I can't remember the list of people's name that it came under the ownership. They would have regarded it as ownership, I guess. And then from there, I think the Billings, is it Billingtons? I think they actually bought the land. And the tupuna that's buried there was actually, I think he went to war, and he was the only legal owner of that land at the time.
Mm.
And I think whoever the family were that bought that land actually honoured him.
Mm.
Yeah, Linda, you'll have to explain the story, but there were pa sites around there and Urupa around there. And I think our whānau even had a reserve land across from there, which was a few acres. I think it was over like 15 acres. But because back in those days, people weren't actually notified that they owned land. We lost that through what they call, I think under the PKW and under the council rates. People were having to pay rates, and there was no jobs at that time for us our whānau to pay rates. And that was only kind of recent, I think. But kia ora, you can tell some more there, Sarah.
So Commissioner Coffin, Station Coffin, just for a bit of context. So this is Mangere Road up here that links up with State Highway 3 south of New Plymouth.
Mm.
So this area here is the Smart Road fuzz area on the eastern side of the Waiwakaio. So just here, as Julie mentioned, this is the Billings what was known as the Billings subdivision. So Manudo Crescent's the name of the is the name of the street, and just in is the grave of Manudo. So as part of the subdivision. So hopefully you can see that. So the grave of Manudo has its own allotment, and that area is zoned historic reserve. But obviously it has a general residential zoning, or proposed general residential zoning under the proposed district plan. So yeah, that was just one of the properties that I guess properties that Julie's referred to in her evidence.
It's an interesting example because you've got a historic reserve which has high levels of protection under the Reserves Act and very prescriptive procedures if you want to make any changes. What would be seen as the advantage of having a Maori purpose zone for that particular reserve?
I'm probably going to discuss this with you on Friday, but anyway.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm going to pose the question now, and you can come back to me on Friday.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to answer that now. I mean, for me, in my opinion, it's that multi-purpose zone actually better reflects the history, the whakapapa of that whenua as well, and the way that the provisions are drafted. That in my opinion, obviously I understand there's the conflict between the Reserves Act and the Resource Management Act, and I understand maybe the Maunga decision out of Tamaki probably isn't going to be quite as helpful in our favour. But I think Maya described it as the Reserves Act is one of the the remaining colonial relics that doesn't always work in the favour of Māori. So for me, it's around the purpose of the zone is changing those behaviours of people as well, and it's not always around. And this is set out in my evidence as well. Sorry to be already having this discussion with you, but that there's not always that development potential. It's about the behaviours of people that are using that whenua, or those who are buried in that whenua in that particular location. So anyway, to share my opinion there. Gate crash, Julie's evidence.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you for doing that. It just raises a number of issues for me about if you do have a reserve, which is under Reserves Act, it doesn't necessarily have to have a zoning that is open space. It could be a reserve and have a different zoning for district plan purposes. And whether that matters, and it's a legal issue as well, but it's a planning issue. Perhaps not be able to be solved. Yeah. But we'll hear some more about it tomorrow. It's an interesting issue because I know lots of good things are quite often planned or dreamed about on reserve land, but it's just getting planning consent is one thing, but getting approval through the Reserves Act is very difficult sometimes. But
yeah, and I've started having. I've had some initial conversations as well with Joe and Julie's colleague Renee at the council as well. Renee's the council open space and design lead. So just around how do we manage those conflicts, and potentially obviously the multi-purpose zone is a really enabling zone. So are changes needed in the open spaces zones to better reflect these types of situations? And I think probably some other examples, tūpare kino examples as well, just through my experience, are the ones, and now I can't think of their names, your whanaunga, Linda and Julie, the kahu tairoa, those pa down by Wit, behind Wit. Again, examples.
Sarah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've both jumped in there.
So examples of historic reserve as well, I think that don't. So they might that open space reserves, open space zonings down there that probably don't best reflect the significance of those areas to tangata whenua, just in my opinion.
Okay. Well, Julie, that's probably the end of your presentation. It's been a pleasure to talk with you again, and Sarah will catch up on and reconvene that discussion tomorrow by the sound of things, which is good. Thank you very much for your assistance, Julie. Right, we're now moving to Manukurahi Papu. I see Anaru there. Is there? But he's with Ruki Rangiora. Yes.
Yeah. So Commissioner Dash, I've just heard from Joe White, and unfortunately, both her and her brother Jeff they've had some COVID cases recently, and they're in their workplaces, so they're just a little bit swamped with mahi at the moment. So
Okay.
they haven't joined, but
we have their evidence, don't we?
yeah, and I think so on Anaru is obviously giving evidence in a Manukurihi Pa trust capacity as well, and I think the evidence is really complementary. So Anaru may be able to give some insight as their cousin anyway.
Tēnā koe, Anaru. Good to see you again. Welcome.
Goodbye. Tēnā koe, can you hear me loud and clear? Ka pai, kia ora tātou, mihi ana kia koutou I whai wahi ki te tūhono mai. I raro I tēnei kaupapa e kēnei ko te mahere rohe. Kei nā komihana, nā kōrua I whakatūwhera, whakawātea tēnei papa, tēnei ara, nei rā mihi kia kōrua, o te rā, tēnā tātou. Ko Anaru White toku ingoa. Kia ora, my name's Anaru White. I'm here to provide the statement in support of the submission of Pukerangi Ora Hapu and Manukurihi Pa Reserve, and also support the submission of Te Kotahitanga Te Aotearoa, and as Sarah Muckle just said, of Manukurihi Hapu as well. I've been a resource management practitioner for Pukerangi Ora for the past 3 years. And during that time, I have had been fortunate and grateful enough to be able to walk the whenua, sit down and wānanga and listen to the stories and kōrero of our kaumata, and experience firsthand just exactly what impacts, or the impacts that effects-based planning has had through the operative district plan from the early 2000s through to today on our whenua. I'm also currently the Pukerangi Ora Hapu chairperson. I've been a trustee up at Manukurihi Pa Reserve Trust for 3 years, 2 as treasurer, and I'm currently overseeing the redevelopment of our marae, including our current rebuild of our whare kai, whare manaki ko Tamuwahine. And further to that, my experience and that of Pukerangi Ora in regards to resource management matters most recently has been set out in evidence to hearings 5 and 14. The focus of this evidence is the special purpose Maori purpose zone. This evidence specifically focuses on 4 key areas: Pukerangi Ora Hapu, area of interest; Kairau Marae, extent of the Maori purpose zone; Pukerangi Ora Pa, request to be zone Maori purpose zone; and Manukurihi Pa Reserve Trust. Before I get into the detail of those first 4 points, just a couple of things. It was really important for us, or for me, for our hapu, for our Pa Reserve, is the importance of having been located and been in a place that's of significance. And I'm aware that we had the opportunity to host these hearings up at Kairau Marae. For a number of reasons, as you can imagine, it didn't quite happen. However, that invitation, and specifically from our Paukuia, Auntie Kura, who I know both Commissioner Dace and Commissioner Coffin, you met up at Pukerangi Ora Pa. She particularly extends an invitation to you to come to Kairau Marae for this as well. So in saying that, I put in with my the submission, this evidence, just some photos that I just want to go to first, just so we can kind of set the scene. And then as I go through my further evidence, you've already kind of been located to the place. I think with the current situation, this is the best that we can do. So I'll just go through the slideshow with the different areas I'm about to talk about, and then I hope that provides a bit of context, a bit of detail, and as best as we can in the situation, a bit of context. So you're currently looking at Kairau Marae. That's our marae for Pukerangi Ora Hapu. That's our whare there. You've got the whare kai to the left, storage part to the place where we have a mattress room as well. The whare, it's called Te Hunga Ririki. Te Hunga Ririki was named after the group of small people because it's for them, i.e. tamariki. So this house was built for tamariki, which is quite well aligns to what my kōrero today is, because this is the opportunity here for us as hapu, for marae, for pa, for papakāinga, for etc. For Māori, for tangata whenua, really relies on those aspirations for our mokopuna, for our tamariki. So this was named, or this whare was built for them. There's also another kōrero to the Hunga Ririki, and that's the group who you don't see. So that's the group out back who are preparing the kai. doing the dishes, making sure everything's organised, that our marae is looking beautiful as well. Because we don't have that happening in the back, then the things out the front, the tikanga side of things don't happen as well. So kia ora, Julie, for bringing this up timely. If we just go to the next one. So this is a recent waiaranga you have. Hopefully it's situated close to our maunga as well, and it's just down the road from Pukerangi Ora Pa, which is the next slide as well, which I won't talk too much to because I know you've been up there. So this was a recent, 2019 now, when we had to Putaki o Te Riri up at Pukerangi Ora Pa. And yep, the next one, Judy. Thank you. Where we had rōpū groups from around the country actually came up and listened to the stories of our pa as well. So I'm aware that you've been up to the pa as well. So that's Pukerangi Ora Pa. And next, for Manukorahi Pa Reserve Trust, we oversee and look after the whenua and the whare at Owai Marae. So this was Te Rao Maui Pōmari, the day that we commemorate Maui, Dr. Sir Maui Pōmari, and all the mahi that he has done. He is statue is and his ashes are at Owai, and this is one of the many kaupapa that brings not just Te Atiawa, not just Manukorahi hapu, not just Te Atiawa hapu, but Te Atiawa, Taranaki iwi as a whole, as a collective together, and also the motu who come here and acknowledge and to reconnect under this kaupapa as well. So you can see the whare there. There's been quite a lot of work done already since 2019 in terms of a lot of refurbs of those two whare. And the one in the background, you can see with the blue doors, that has been demolished just recently as well. And that's where the new whare kai that was just started on has been built as well. So that's one of the kaupapa we have up there to commemorate Maui Pōmari and his mahi that he's done, and still guides us today around health benefits, housing for Māori. Thank you, kia ora, Julie. And this is following on that for kaupapa that we said, this was Te Pūtaki, where we welcomed on the Prime Minister in 2019. And again, you can see the wahine there with the poi real prominent in Taranaki and what we're really known for as well. And when you look through there, we're seeing not just Manukorahi hapu, not just seeing all the different hapu there, Te Atiawa, we're also seeing iwi from around Taranaki who came together under kotahitanga to unite and to celebrate these stories around Te Pūtaki o Te Riri, which is a national war commemoration around the Māori wars. In this case, obviously looking at the Taranaki wars from there. Kia ora, Julie. And as I said before, Ko Taba Wahine, which you saw in the background, the previous photo, has now been demolished. And we're working with Boone Limited, so it's timely. And mihi ana ki a koe Merrily, your kaimahi, Merrily and the team from Boone Limited are supporting us with our master plan that we did a few years ago that we've started to act on already, and then moving into the rebuild of our whare kai, which is, as I said, it's underway a couple of weeks ago, and it's been demolished, and then in the process of building a new whare kai so we can continue to talk about or fulfill and those aspirations that I'll talk a little bit more about for Owai Marae shortly. So that's what the new whare kai building was looking like. Next one, kia ora, Julie. And there's just some other plans, there's different elevations of there as well. Huge project, takes time. Obviously resonate with what Ngāti Te Whiti are doing, aspirational, generational mahi for us here up here at Owai as well. So there's some of the plans there that we're going through, or what it's going to look like at the end as well. And kia ora, Julie. And that's just some insights of the current finishings of what we want to do there as well. And bit of a narrative around that, but the main narrative, which I really like at the moment, is that you won't see many tū whakaaro or carvings, etc. in there. Our, I suppose, decorated detail was done through manaakitanga. That is by looking after our people and our manuhiri as well. So that's just the real brief introduction. Thanks, Julie. Just to the places that I'm going to talk about. Obviously, I know you've been to some of them, but that's the best you could do there, just to situate things for the moment there. So the first one I want to talk about is kia ora, Stephen.
Yes, I'm happy with either.
Sorry.
We enjoy the camaraderie in these hearings. It's quite unique and it makes for good good decision making, I think. But just to let you know that Julie and I are working on a plan to certainly get to come to one of the marae before our job is finished. We feel that would be incredibly a great honour for us. So I know Julie's probably hatched some sort of plan through working with Sarah Marco. So he just let you know that we were very, very keen to have this hearing on one of the marae, and it's just we've been foiled, but we will persevere, hopefully, and have a visit at some stage.
And yeah, please, I can speak on behalf of Tū Marae Kairo and all. That invitation is open and critical for what we're talking about when we talk about this process and aspirations as well. So kia ora, thank you.
Thank you.
So the first area I want to talk about is Pukerangi Ora Hapu area of interest. And I previously described our area of interest in my evidence in hearing 14, specifically in paragraphs 8 to 10. So that's also outlined in the evidence that I've submitted there, and in particular that the entire rohe of Pukerangi Ora is of significance to our hapu. We, Pukerangi Ora Hapu, support the use of the Māori purpose zone within the proposed district plan to enable development of Māori land. How we, Māori, see fit. Pukerangi Ora wish to see other areas of whenua within our hapu zone, Māori purpose zone as well. And I'm going to elaborate on that in the next part when I talk about Kairo Marae and the extent of the Māori purpose zone as well. So within Pukerangi Ora Hapu, rohe is Kairo Marae. It's the only piece of whenua within our rohe proposed to be zone Māori purpose zone. The Māori purpose zone for Kairo must, in my opinion, also include the land described in Kairo 2E2 and 2E3A reserve. This contains the marae and urupa. These two pieces of whenua and their associated activities such as tangihanga, wānanga, hui, etc. go hand in hand and are connected. There are a number of pieces of Māori land within Pukerangi Ora rohe. Māori land ownership is complex. In many instances, there are numerous whānau or owners. When these owners or whānau are ready, Pukerangi Ora will be happy to support the whānau through the process of rezoning to Māori purpose zone if they wish or if they desire. We, Pukerangi Ora, trust that this process will be cost and process efficient for our whānau. From there, the pā, Pukerangi Ora pā, at paragraph 12 of my evidence in hearing 14, I set out the significance of Pukerangi Ora pā. It is obviously a matua pā. It has significance for us. It's where we derive our name, and I'm aware that Commissioner Dace and Commissioner Coffin, you're aware of the significance of the pā for us and through your visit up there a few months ago as well. Pukerangi Ora hapu have several aspirations for the pā that have been formed by past and present kōrero and kaupapa. These aspirations include telling our stories through on-site interpretation and landscaping. This project that I'm talking about with this kaupapa is a co-designed kaupapa with the Department of Conservation and New Plymouth District Council also providing support. The ultimate aspiration for the hapu is to have ownership of our pā. We will not be bound by the historical events in the past. We only look forward to the future and how tamariki and mokopuna can thrive in the environment and their cultural landscape. And just to add on to that, we feel that a lot of our kōrero, or a lot of way that we are engaged or perhaps even guided or judged on what we want is from our past kōrero, our past history events. It's important to acknowledge the future, and that's the aspirational pieces, the generational kaupapa pieces that we're talking about as well. In my opinion, in achieving the aspirations and reflecting the intent of partnership and use, the best zone for Pukerangi Ora is Māori purpose zone. Currently proposed to be zoned rural production zone. Pukerangi Ora hapu sought Pukerangi Ora pā to be zoned Māori purpose zone at submission points 515.1a and 515.1b. And I understand the zoning of Pukerangi Ora pā will be further discussed at hearing 22. I think we're talking about the pā as well, and when we talk about aspirations and generational project and what our ultimate aspiration for the pā as well, it looks really good back to the kaupapa Maori framework as outlined in the proposed district plan. And I think about the values there, it's in terms of ukaiportanga, rangatiratanga, the chance for us to have that autonomy that we probably always have over that, but however, to have autonomy over that as well, and that kotahitanga nature that you'll see that we're working with DOC, we're working with the NPDC, and it's a good case study or an opportunity there for hapu to participate meaningfully in the process, but also for the council to be able to respond in a way that's again meaningful for us and beneficial for us and beneficial for all to get those better outcomes as well from the as we talked about. And finally, Manukuri Pā Reserve Trust. So I'm just going to do a little bit of detail about the trust. So the trust was established to maintain the whenua and whare of Manukuri Pā, or Marae, in order to advance, encourage, to support the interests of beneficial landowners, iwi, hapu, and whānau. The trust is made up of 12 seats, so there's 6 beneficial landowner seats and 6 seats for the hapu. As detailed in my evidence of my cousins, of my whanaunga, Jeff and Joe White from Manukuri Hapu, the whenua on which the pā is located has an extensive history of confiscation and alienation. The pā is a much smaller remnant of its former self. The aspirations of the pā of Manukuri Pā is to provide a place to manakia whānau and manuhiri, and it's a place for Māori, for whānau to connect and belong and to educate a whole community. Our current whare kai rebuild is based on these aspirations and will provide for future generations. The total cost of the build is $3.8 million, and it's expected to be completed later this year, in December of this year. As mentioned in my evidence in hearing 5, specifically paragraph 26, Manukuri Pā Reserve Trust raised concerns regarding the proposed residential development upstream of the pā on the Tangaroa stream. The restoration of the Tangaroa through the Waitara Stormwater Project aligns with our aspirations for reconnecting of whānau to their whenua. Under the operative district plan, the Manukuri Pā Reserve Trust is, or the whenua, is designated C69, its designated purpose being for Owai Marae Māori Reserve, with an underlying residential A environment area zoning. Manukuri Pā is proposed to be zoned Māori Purpose Zone under the proposed district plan. The Manukuri Pā Trust Reserve support the Māori Purpose Zone zoning. This will enable us to continue to achieve our aspirations and provide for future generations. And again, I understand the zoning and extent of Manukuri Pā will be further discussed at hearing 22. To address the issues, recommendations to address the issues that I've raised as evidence, I recommend support the Māori Purpose Zone provisions, correct the Māori Purpose Zone boundaries of Kairo Marae, and rezone Pukerangi Pā from rural production zone to Māori Purpose Zone. E roto e tērā, nei rata mihi ki a koutou. Tēnā tātou. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Anaru. Antoine.
Kia ora, Anaru. Hey, thank you for your submission and the summary. I've just got one question for you, and this is in regards to Pukerangi ora Pā. And I'm just wanting to understand what the current status of the reserve is, because you said that, I think in your evidence you said that it's got a rural production zone. Mm-hmm. Is it a historic reserve?
It's a historic reserve. Yeah. So when we talk about the reserve, we're talking, I guess, the part that you went to, so the dock reserve. Yes. The extent of the so within the reserve, the dock reserve, there's no, it's a reserve, there's no rural activities take place within there. The extent of the pā, if you think over the road, obviously there's a farm, but what we're talking about, even though some would say it is a rural setting, it doesn't align with that zone, in our opinion.
Is there a management plan in place at all for that?
There is yes, DOC have got a management plan in place. Okay. They part of their, I believe, as part of their requirements, they have a management plan. The process that we're going through in terms of our interpretation, and just on that, it would have been, I really would have liked to share our current plans with you in terms of what interpretations we're looking to put up there, whare kōrero, etc. However, we're still in the process of a hapu as a working party with DOC and MPDC coming on board now to finalise where the information would go public through this. So we're just keeping those closely, but I'm sure at some time you'll see those. It'd be great to share those plans with what we want to have up there as well. Yeah.
What do you see the main advantage of having a multi-purpose zone for Pukerangi Orapa? What would it enable or provide for you from your perspective?
I think for us, the multi-purpose zone is an enabler. It aligns a lot more of our aspirations, or I suppose to quote, the activities that we want to do up there. So when we want to perform our tikanga, our rites of traditions, so to say, up there, we can without within the enablers of what the multi-purpose zone can do as well. Things change over time. People attitudes obviously is what we're looking at here as well, and the people's behaviours, and we want to protect that, and we believe that the multi-purpose zone will enable us to protect that and look after our power and our aspirations as well.
That's interesting, because my current read of the multi-purpose zone is it's very enabling. It's providing for a whole range of different types of activities, and I suppose on a continuum, at one end, commercial development, residential housing, dwellings, to sort of in the middle, a range of passive and active recreation and leisure, and down the other end, restoration, wetlands, revegetation, providing better access, protection of sites of significance. So it's got a wide, broad spectrum of different types of activities that might occur. And I suppose I was trying to put my finger on whereabouts in the continuum you're looking for in terms of the future, because I suppose on one hand, I could just step back a little bit and say, well, would residential development and commercial development be appropriate at Pukerangi Orapa? And it's got a question mark, but the zone enables that to occur. And so it's just trying to understand,
and probably
what are the checks and balances that you'd like to see in place, because thinking about the future and people's behaviours or the way they express themselves changes, and those values can change over time. So it's just trying to see, because I suppose from my early questions, the historic reserve status and imagine plan are right at another end, the very protective, very prescriptive, quite constraining, and the zone is quite different approach to that. So I just wondered whether you had comments to make there.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting. We've almost had a wānanga about the multi-purpose zone. I mentioned Jeff and Joe. We've actually sat down and talked and tried to understand, the benefits of the multi-purpose zone. We've been supported great by Sarah and Iwi, etc. from that. So, when I say for our ultimate aspiration is ownership, it's you talk to Kaumata, it's like we've never given it up, DOC, but there's that DOC overlay of things, that DOC ownership. So with the multi-purpose zone, when I think about the multi-purpose zone, and when I've talked to Kaumata, whānau about why put the multi-purpose zone on that, it does enable us for that future or that potential development out there. Is residential development possibility up at the par? I don't know. It used to be a kāinga. However, that's a kōrero for later, and that's how the multi-purpose zone can enable that. If that's fun, commercial opportunities. If we're going to build our plan is to put an interpretation up there, and part of that is for the hapu to tell hapu stories. So you hear it from hapu, you understand what happened from hapu. Therefore, we'd like to have guided tours up there. It's not a commercial focus. However, there's a commercial opportunity. Our focus is about maintaining, putting that maintenance plan in place, and about having things which I believe the multi-purpose zone enables from there as well.
Hey, thank you, Anna. Kia ora, Stephen.
Kia ora, thank you, Antoine. I'm struggling with my mouse on 3 different screens and looking at evidence, and so just like Antoine, you'll see me glancing around. It's because we're operating under this Zoom environment, and I'm lucky to have a 3 screens set up at my home office, which is does allow us quite a lot of flexibility. Anaru, thank you for that evidence and those answers. I just wanted to ask you, in terms of your planning practice, a bit of a follow-up question from Sarah's korero around the really around what a zoning might mean on a district plan. Obviously, a zoning Maori purpose zone zoning allows certain activities and buildings to be constructed, some permitted, some would need a consent. And it also has some objectives and policies about what's trying to be achieved in the zone. But in terms of land ownership and control, whether it's DOC under the Reserves Act or ultimately hapu in terms of your own ownership, it's the landowner that makes those decisions about opportunities, isn't it? Whether to take advantage of permitted activity and do something that's as you see it.
I guess the DOC, if you refer to DOC and the ownership of the PA, I wouldn't say it's a contentious one, it's a work in progress, and that's why we've got that partnership with DOC. And so we haven't got, and I think we've been strategic. DOC have been come to the party as well. They recognise the significance of the PA, Pukerangi o PA. So they've always had this desire, this to support hapu with what we want underneath there as well. And I guess the Te Aotearoa Claims Settlement Act also comes into play here as well. It wasn't part of the Settlements Act. That's where the DOC overlays come in there. That anything that happens up there in terms of, when I say things that happen up there, if someone want to take drone footage or do any commercial based activities, they need to get permission or from hapu and iwi. So I guess it's probably, that's why we want the Maori Purpose Zone, and I know it gives us more enabling in terms of what could be done under the SASM or as an archaeological site as well, and it's significance for us as well on the plan, and so it's an ongoing corridor. It's been a real good corridor for us to have around Maori Purpose Zone. It's been timely with the mahi that we're doing at Marae, but also up at the PA as well.
But just extending it out, the power of mapping and recognition and plans. We've got a long history of plan making in New Zealand, starting back, way back. But the power of actually having something recognised in a formal plan, notated. Do you think that's important as part of the intangible sort of benefits of the Maori Purpose Zone, perhaps in some of these areas?
Yes, definitely. I think definitely. I think you look at what Ngāti Te Whiti are proposing and doing as well, and look at what we're doing at Orwa, and I think the planning part is huge for things as well, and what we can do to help enable our aspirations is critical, and also being resourced to be able to do that as well.
That's good. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. We'll see you again on our travels, Anaru, I'm sure. Thank you for your assistance. Look, we're looking at probably cup of tea time. Was Fern struggling, I know, with COVID and in her family and things. So, Sarah, are we likely to see Fern today?
No, not today, on Friday.
Okay. Well, look, I think let's have a cup of tea for 10 minutes or so, have a break, and we'll return and talk to Marlene and then Keith. Thank you. Hello, Marlene.
Like magic.
Kia ora, Marlene.
Kia ora.
You've got some speaking notes.
Yep, I've sent.
Yes.
Yeah, I've sent some through, and I've also got a PowerPoint.
Great, thank
which
you.
the amazing Julie's going to share with you. Can we go to the other one first, Julie? Is that all right? The other PowerPoint, which is about the PAR site, PAR. You got that one? Probably came first in the first email, did it? Or do I need to find it? Hang on. Sorry. It'll be my fault, not Julie's. I want you all to know.
I've just been faffing around trying to find your statement, so that's all good.
I've
Thanks,
got it
Robin.
now, Julie, if you want me to share the screen. Is it?
It
Okay.
should be online now.
Okay, sorry. Oh, yeah, is that it? Yes, everyone see that? Okay, look, thank you for filling me in this afternoon. I made a mistake and thought that the next day of the hearing was tomorrow. So we haven't got a lot to say about this. First of all, on behalf of the Uranui PAR trustees, they've got the only piece of land within the Ngāti Mutunga Rohe that's zoned Māori purposes, and here's a picture of the marae at present. They've had 2 meetings with the council prior to the proposed plan going out to go through what the advantages were for them and did it fit in with their aspirations or help them fulfil their aspirations. They've the Uranui PAR trustees manage this land. It's the only marae in Ngāti Mutunga, and they manage it on behalf of all the descendants of Ngāti Mutunga. And on the next slide, they've been working for about 20 years now with a plan to develop the marae. They've got recent funding to do an actual architectural sort of design of it. And as you can see, they really do need it to be zoned Māori purpose zone to be able to do all the things they want to do on it, which is things like gardens. And up in the top corner there is an area of papakoinga housing. And also the existing houses are too close to the boundary under the rural production zone, which is what the marae was zoned, and they also were too close to the Maui pipeline. And in the last slide, you can see that they're going to put quite a big new building on, which is also helped by the zoning of Māori purposes zone. One of the things that Ngāti Mutunga wanted to be made clearer, and it has been made a bit clearer today, was there was slight confusion about the decision-making process about, and I think Keith's going to talk about this too, about which areas were chosen by the council to be zoned under the proposed district plan. The PAR trustees were under the impression that they were still in the process of making a decision, and we would have to actually apply in a submission to get it. And then when the plan came out, us and several other marae sections were already zoned, and when I chatted to the trustees of some of those other PAR sites, they had no idea about it. So what we were wanting going forward is a really clear way of how you become a Māori purposes zone, so that everyone's clear about what needs to happen. But I think that's got a bit clearer during the day. Yep.
Just while we got that image up, do the trustees see the current houses staying there with the yes.
Yeah. And I'll put this up with a pinch of salt because there's still a lot of debate about where that new house is going to go. And that's when I was listening to the chat about the marae and the hapu plans. I just don't think it's ever going to work having a plan that's set in concrete that needs to be updated through a planning process. Like the plan for the Uranui Marai's probably been around for about 20 years, and it changes every meeting, and it needs to, because it needs to, you know, people have different ideas, people come up with, you know, thinking about a different way of doing things, and also the funding changes. So in the, you know, doing all this is really dependent on funding. So I can't see any being able to use a stuck in mud development plan. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't know whether that's a planning term, but it's something I'll actually think about in the future. I think it's it's probably quite a good
Which term was that? The set in concrete or stuck in the mud?
no, stuck in the mud plan.
Yeah. The other problem we had with the whole multi-purpose design, and we spent literally hours and hours talking about this at the Kaitiaki group, and it's probably leading on to the next slide, Julie, about Māori land, was the definition of, and I'm probably just being really stupid and not understanding what Joe's saying, but the need for land other than land under the Ture Whenua Act to be able to be put in the Māori purposes zone, not only settlement land, but also land that people like the Runanga specifically buy to be developed for papakainga and for aspirations. And we had a lot of trouble when we talked about this, about how you'd guard against this zoning being sort of hijacked by developers who weren't actually doing it with Māori aspirations. And obviously the easiest way to do that was to stick to Māori land under Te Ture Whenua, but also this is the Māori land that Ngāti Mutunga have got left, the little blue bits, which you can't really see because there's hardly any of them. And other than the pa, none of them are under the control of the iwi. They're all under whānau groups or individual groups. There's one other Māori reserve within Ngāti Mutunga, and there's about 11 urupa reserves. So what happened instead after settlement, which is the next slide, thanks Julie, is Ngāti Mutunga got a total of 11 properties back. I don't know that we did very well in the negotiations, but I won't say that in front of our chairperson. And it probably resulted in less than about 120 hectares. There was one large bit of 100 hectares that's in forest, that's under a conservation covenant. There's 3 other bits that were wahi tapu that were historic reserves with DOC, which we now control. One of them's partly historic reserve, that's the vault at Te Rangihiro at Okoke Pa, but the rest of that, and there's 2 other pa sites that are covered in forest that we actually have got without the reserve status on it anymore. And then the bits that are probably the most suitable for Māori purpose zone and being developed are both reserve land with MPDC. And one of those is the Onairo campground and the other is the Uranui campground. Now, the Perth District Council opposed Ngāti Mutunga getting those campgrounds back when the settlement was going on. They were quite strongly opposed to them coming back to Ngāti Mutunga, and the Uranui community were opposed to that campground coming back. The Onairo people were okay, but the Uranui people were strongly against it. So there's a problem there, not only with attitude, but probably politically with the thought of those becoming Māori purposes zone in the near future till things calm down. So that leaves us with 4 sections in Uranui Township, which is 2 acres in total there. So that's all we've got that that Ngāti Mutunga would want as the Runanga to put under Māori purposes zone. There are other people within Ngāti Mutunga who are looking at putting their land under, particularly the other bit of Māori reserve land. So we just wanted to make it absolutely certain that you could put Māori settlement land under Māori purposes zoning, and that there was a clear purpose of how to do that. So that's all I had to say really. Other than that, the PAR trustees are really happy with the zoning and the rules and the policies and the objectives. Yeah.
Antoine?
Hey, kia ora, Marlene. This is a quasi-planning question. What's your understanding of how the process for a Māori purpose zone works? So like, if an area of land has been zoned Māori purpose, has Māori purpose zone, and you're looking to do a development, what's your current understanding of how that works? What would you need to do?
I wouldn't think we'd need to do anything other than apply for the consents that are needed under the rules of that zone. We wouldn't be looking to do a development plan or anything like that. Yeah,
Yeah, because
that's for the
okay.
bit of land that is zoned Māori purpose zone. I'm still confused about how the process would have to go to get other bits of land zoned that way. Yeah, other than go through the next plan change hearing in 10 years or 20 years or whenever we're going to have that, if we in fact do have it. Yeah,
because our rudimentary understanding, which is getting better and better by the day, is that there are two pathways you may go down. One is you develop an iwi or hapu development plan, which clearly sets out those areas you want to develop, what kind of development might occur there. Those matters in policy 3 are covered. And unless you trigger those sort of the 10-metre height restriction and some setbacks and things, you've got a permitted activity status. So you're not actually having to require to get a consent because you're a permitted activity. The other pathway, as we understand, is you don't have a iwi hapu development plan. Yeah. But you somehow have you're going to proceed with activities that are fitting within the zone, and unless you trigger there's some specific standards, then you effectively have you're able to go and do what you need to do unless you trigger some of those fixed standards. So we think those are the two pathways. Does that fit with your kind of understanding?
Yeah, that does fit with my understanding. And as I was saying, I think we would be going through the second one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I think you'd be very brave putting up the Irinui PAR plans, though. I mean, they're amazing. They've had architects and been working on them for years, and they're quite involved. I don't think we'd want those to be part of the plan if it meant that we had to stick to them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Easier just to go through the other pathway and get a resource consent if we had to. Yeah. Okay. It's up.
I'll pass it back to you, Stephen.
I'm mucking around with my mouse again. Thank you, Marlene. I wonder whether, Joe, you'd like to just provide some response, if you can, to Marlene's queries there about other non-Te Ture Whenua Maori Act or land granted native reserve. Where do they fit and where they might fit in the future?
That's a good point, and it's something that came up at the very beginning of discussions that I was involved in, because I haven't been involved right from the beginning. And the reason is that there was a concern that expressed that developers would get hold of, potentially get hold of non-Māori land and use the provisions of the Māori purpose zone to, create a development that was sort of inappropriate on some level. And that the only way we could think initially to stop that happening was to just make it available to Māori purpose zone, Māori land under Te Ture Whenua. But that didn't stop necessarily the other side of the activities that are proposed under the zone, such as other forms of cultural activities and Māori purpose activities to take place on Māori land and treaty land, and potentially other ancestral land, as sort of discussed by Te Tahitanga over time, etc. But that's a tricky aspect of it, I think. that you wouldn't want to make that available to developers necessarily, unless they were developers that were, you know, happy and willing and wanting to work with iwi hapu on a development that would, you know, fit the aspirations and the needs of iwi hapu for that area. So it's a tricky balance. I think we've probably moved a little bit beyond that now in the discussions we've had over time and the hearings. But it would be really good to hear some more comment from iwi hapu on that issue as to how we could potentially, you know, guard against that if it's not just on Māori land. Given that there's so little Māori land as well in the district, that's the key issue that comes up all the time, isn't it? Really. So
it's an interesting one because when we had the submissions from Paraninihi Ki Waitotara Trust, and obviously their lands are another category again, and you could see into the future where you might have, which I'm inverted commas, private land, but it's a joint venture between Māori land trusts or Māori companies and iwi hapu, and they're looking to progress developments that are enabling Māori purposes, but they're using private land because that's the land that's available in New Plymouth. So you wouldn't want to necessarily preclude that because it only applies to different classes of land. But actually, I do take on board the point, and it's a point well made that it could be used in all sorts of strange ways. I remember when I first looked at the provisions as proposed, and I was looking at the commercial area, and I was thinking, well, you could do a shopping centre. And all sorts of different things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see on Māori land, but you wouldn't necessarily have some of the thresholds to meet that you might meet in some of the commercial zones. But that said, it's a zone which is trying to, I suppose, in some ways, redress some of the injustices of the past, but also acknowledge where Māori land holdings are. And I think Marlene's done that very well in terms of there's only a small amount of Māori land, so you want to try and be as enabling as possible. And I suppose not putting up barriers to development because you're the last one to develop on your remaining land. So for all of those good reasons that are in the objectives for the chapter and in the strategic objectives, it's going some way to achieve that. But I suppose we're looking at the unintended consequences of things that might sit around it. So good discussion. Thank you.
Marlene, I had one question off one of your slides. The 4 house sites or residential sites in Uranui, are they all contiguous or are they scattered around?
No, they're scattered. They're separate. Yeah. 2 of them aren't built on. One of them's got a house that needs demolished, and one of them's got the iwi office on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not like a contiguous block.
No.
Yes. And then I think, do you have any concerns that, you know, those would be residential, I presume? Yeah,
but it's sort of that balance of doing papakoinga to get, because a lot of Ngāti Mutunga people want to come home, but can't afford the house prices in Uranui because they're quite high there. So that was why we wanted to be able to use the settlement land for that. Yeah, because they do really suit papakoinga housing, and if we get the sewage sorted out in Uranui, that'll be really good.
And would the Maripupa zone allow more denser use of those areas rather than the residential?
Yeah, it would, because you can do better setbacks.
Yes, and allow for co-housing, those sorts of things, which we've heard some interesting korero about, family living with perhaps one kitchen and one wash house, and the number of generations perhaps living or families.
And that would all really fit in with what Ngāti Mutunga wants to do. Yes.
Okay. So you haven't asked for those to come into the Maori purpose?
No, we're not really, but we'd like to know what the process is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
And also we're slightly put off because they weren't Māori land. So yeah.
So I suppose all I can say at the moment is that we've been listening carefully to Joe and Sarah Edwards and others about the program of work ahead of the council post this plan, both in terms of SASMs and I suppose just even the relationships that have been enhanced through our process here. That seems to me that there's this planning is going to go on for forever.
Please.
Yeah, but that's the nature of human beings, isn't it? We all have ideas and aspirations and plans, and so yeah. So there's more work to do, isn't there, Joe? I think and the council's both motivated and perhaps resourced with key people to keep the dialogue going. There's not just going to be a hard stop at the end of this plan.
No. Absolutely not. And in fact, it was Marlene who did that great submission in the SASM chapter about needing to have a process that provides for things to change outside of the normal 10-year / 20-year district plan process. And so, we totally envisage more plan changes that, more regular plan changes to do all of these things that are, for want of a better term, left over from the proposed district plan process, because obviously we can't do everything.
Yeah, things that might pop out or that aren't quite ready to advance because of one thing or another.
That's right.
Good. Marlene, as always, it's great to receive your submissions and your wisdom and your experience.
And thanks for your help, Julie. On my PowerPoint's up again, but yeah, thank you.
Okay. Kia ora, Marlene. Keith, you're waiting patiently there. Thank you.
Commissioners whānau, tēnā koutou katoa. Just before I start, Julie, you were going to have that little map available if required. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'm still picking myself off the floor at your suggestion that perhaps this plan change was going to last forever.
Planning,
Marlene,
I said, will last forever.
like Marlene, this has been my life since March last year, so we hope to see the end of it.
Yes.
My name is Keith Holswich, as you all know, and I've been tasked by my hapu to represent them. But can I make the point that at this occasion, I'm speaking primarily on behalf of the Ngāti Rahiri Hapu trustees. And the trustees are the Maori Land Court mandated entity that manages the hapu reserved lands that we're going to be talking about. And I'm a hapu elected member of that trust, and we are restructuring at the moment. And as the rezoning is to be heard at another time, our presentation today only deals with the Maori purpose zone provisions. And I'll read from my notes if I may. And in the first hearing way back last year, we set out the aspirations of our hapu and how we wished our aspirations should be reflected in the proposed district plan. And also we advised how pleased we were that council had initially at least involved us with the process. And as such, we fully supported the strategic directions that had been presented. However, in the last few hearings, we've been rather scathing towards council in their lack of consultation with us. We hope that this Maori purpose zone heads us back onto the right track. And that said, Mr. Chairman, we are in the same position of Marlene when she described that she never knew the process for adding development plans. I'd never heard that until it came up in these hearings. And indeed, how we could add the land to the zone. We were never advised of that either. And what land appears to have been added to this zone seems to be a council initiative without our involvement, but that's enough of that. And for such a very important matter, the Maori purpose zone, our evidence is very, very brief. Suffice to say that the introduction of the Maori purpose zone is most certainly one of the aspirations that we mentioned all that time ago at the first hearing. And because of this, we're pleased to advise that we support this zoning 100%. We were involved at the start and had much initial input. Unfortunately, we were left out of the process at the end and were not involved with the nitty-gritty of the wording used. That's a bit unfortunate, but whoever was left did a wonderful job. But we note that in the section 42A report under procedural matters on page 11, we were the only hapu of Te Atiawa not to be advised about the extents of Maori purpose zone. And that's been us all the way through this plan process. But again, we move on. We're very pleased to note that we agree with the overview of the chapter, and we agree wholeheartedly with the objectives and the rules. Thank you, Council, and thank you to whoever put these together. We note we can accept all of the policies except one. Again, thank you to Council. And that policy is MPZ P5, where it's noted that all effects, not just adverse effects, are required to be internalized. It appears that we are the only people and the only zone where internalization of effects is required. And we asked the council, why? What effects are council specifically worried about that they must be internalized and only for us? Our neighbours don't have it. The major facility zones don't have that. The rural production zones don't have that. We do. So we ask that any references to internalizing effects either be removed from the Maori purpose zone, or our preference is that that reference, internalizing effects, be added to the policies of every other zone. That is our preference. Our second preference is to remove internalizing effects from the Maori purpose zone. And that, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Coffin, is our only submission. We have that one point to raise. Other than that, we thank Council for the vision to include the zone and for their consideration into the objectives, policies and rules. If we could discuss provision P5, I would be happy. And that's it. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to our brief presentation. Happy to take any questions. Look forward to participating further in the plan, not forever, but just for a little while. To everybody, thank you very much for your time. And I see on screen that Julie has put up our standard plan. Those yellow bits of land are the hapu trustees managed reserved lands. Our original suggestion was to add all of those lands as Maori purpose, quite clearly looking at what's happening now with the rules and what can be done. That should not and will not happen. And I'll have to work very closely with Sarah to put together the paperwork for what we need. But that's for the hearing 22, the rezoning. At the moment, we're just on the Maori purpose zone. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Keith. Starting with Antoine.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Holswich. I suppose I don't have a question so much for you as it is for Ms. Ritchie, just around policy 5 and the internalising effects, just in the instances where that policy would be triggered, expected might be triggered, and then what might be involved with that.
So my only comment is I wanted to have a look across the rest of the plan to see if in actual fact this wording was in the other zone chapters, and I haven't unfortunately had a chance to do that, so I'm hoping to do that tomorrow, to see if Keith's right, and in fact this is the only zone currently, especially in terms of special purpose zones, that includes it, because we would like to look at it. If it doesn't appear in other zones, I'd want to ask that was probably a consistency issue, and we would want to look at that. So that's my response at the moment on that situation.
Thank you, Joe.
I thought you carry on, Antoine. Sorry.
Yeah, it just on the face of it, it seems to be trying to address reverse sensitivity effects in those zones, commercial mixed zones, residential zones, open space socialization zones. And I suppose I was trying to think about whether that is something else that you'd actually need to do as part of your, considering what the concept or the development proposal is, or the hapu development plan.
That's exactly right, and it was intended that there were provisions for reverse sensitivity to be considered, because of obviously other zones impacting on the Maori purpose zone potentially too.
Yes.
But I'm not quite sure what those wording, whether that wording is used elsewhere. So.
Okay. Yeah, because I'd had a quick look at Rule 21 and Rule 22 to see if I could see anything that sort of stood out as saying, dealing with reverse sensitivity, or but there's sort of more broad ones, whether there's adverse effects of the typically be avoided, remedied, or mitigated in 21. And then in R22, nothing seemed really obvious to me, because it does refer to policy 2, but not necessarily to policy 5. So yeah, it was just trying to see how is this connected to the way in which it might be assessed, and it just wasn't really clear to me.
And I can just say that looking at effect standard S3, MPZ S3,
yes.
When the minimum building setbacks are not complied with,
yes,
they're one of the key issues for the matters of discretion, the ability to mitigate adverse effects, including through landscaping. So there's that provision, and there's also a sort of a provision for reverse sensitivity in terms of outdoor storage requirements for urban power. But yeah, I'll need to go into it.
Because I suppose conversely, it's on the other side, is where you don't.
That's right.
You're not inconsistent with those particular standard setbacks, building height, etc., and the envelopes that wouldn't therefore then trigger those matters of discretion. So that was the side where I was coming from. I was saying a development that's sensitive to those standards, so it doesn't trigger those matters of discretion, but then you've still got a policy that's saying deal with and address reverse sensitivity. What's the trigger for that? Or perhaps there isn't one. And it sort of it does rely on where those matters of discretion are triggered, then a fuller assessment is required. So, but I'm just not quite sure how the mechanics of that. I suppose I'm looking towards the end of towards Friday, and I suppose it would be good if you've got one of your colleagues, one of the planners, is able to provide us with like a process diagram of what that might involve in terms of I suppose an anticipated type of proposal that you might, like marae, like for the purpose of a marae, papakainga, that type of development, what that process looks like.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Sorry, Mr. Holswich, I didn't have a question specific for you, but the matters you raised did lend themselves to an appropriate question.
That's fine.
So Keith, I do have a couple of questions. The first one is, we talked maybe yesterday when I was talking about the term minimise versus mitigate, and you've sort of pulled me up on that a bit, I think, because in terms of obligations for perhaps neighbours of yours, in terms of effects that are occurring in and around your special places. You're the receiver of effects, or have been, in terms of tall structures, loss of views, perhaps noise. And I think what you're telling us is that the obligation to internalise all effects on a site or any site is a very high standard, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is, and that we've been consistent with that throughout our hearings. And I mentioned that at the major facility zone specifically because we have got to internalise our waiata on our land.
Yes.
Why can't the big people internalise their noise on their land? So I realise it's probably not going to happen, but I raised it anyway.
It is a point well made. Have you actually got a submission in seeking that deletion? No.
No. Ngāti Rahiri supported the Māori purpose zone is notified and put in a further 2 submissions supporting Te Kotahitanga submission and seeking additional properties to be, as you've seen the map. Yeah.
Yes. So Keith, you've raised this as a planning matter. Joe, it does seem unusual to me. I must say, I haven't seen that before in the plan in my travels or in other plans, and it seems to be an anomaly. But again, if we're going to go down the path that Keith is seeking, we'll need some clear consequential or I don't know, not that I think anyone's gonna or necessarily hold us to task through judicial review or any other process, but you can have a good think about that. It does seem to be an outlier. There may be other examples. If there's not, it's certainly good for you to hear what we might be able to do about that in consultation, obviously, with Sarah Edwards and the team. So thank you for raising that, Keith. It's a very interesting and important point. All right.
So if I can just have 2 more minutes and just to sum up, this Maori purpose zone is definitely one of our aspirations because we always wanted to be able to do what we wanted to do on our land. This is as close, I think, as we're going to get. And so we can accept that. And I see this as long overdue recognition that we belong here and that we have got a place to stand. Everyone else has got their zones, residential, rural, major facilities. We have now got our zone. So it's wonderful to have. And as I said, we support this 100%. So thank you for those last comments, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, Keith. It's now time for a karakia to close our day. I know the protocol is everyone looks at each other and
and then Antoine does it.
Sorry, I'm just lounging out here. Are we up to karakia? Are we done?
Yes.
Oh, ka pai. Oh, shorties anaru.
Kia ora, Sarah. O te rā, kia ora tātou. Ai, e takarana mihi. Kia koutou. O te rā, kia korua nā komihana. Ana, e mihi kawana kia korua o te rā kia tātou. Kia koutou e noho mahu au, e tēnei wā, kia ko koe tērā, Joe. Kia piki te ora o tō tāne, o tō whare o hoki, i te wā o te uri mai tērā tani whā te mate uru tā. Hoa no e roto tēnā kia pai te toina o te rā. Ana ka whakairia te tapu kia wātea ai te ara, kia tūru ki whakataha ai, kia tūru ki whakataha ai. E rongo wakairia ki runga tuturo o te waka maua kia tīna hui e tāki. Kia ora tātou.
Kia
Kia
ora.
ora. Just one last thing for me. I don't know whether anyone saw the hey tiki on my tie, whether you can see that. It's, yeah, perhaps difficult to see. Well, especially this was given to me by NZTE, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. A couple of years ago, I went on a trade mission to Taiwan with a cultural group from Whanau Apanui. Was really working with, it was focusing on potential development of some resources that Indigenous people in Taiwan have around, wind energy, geothermal energy, and just by the way, the connections, I think, in terms of Pacific people, those Taiwan people, some of the languages they were using and some of the carvings were very, very close to home, and it was an amazing trip. But I thought I'd wear it. It's pretty subtle, but just to recognise the importance of today. So there we go. Thank you very much.